Start recording. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. I really do not know exactly what we are going to do today. I often say that I don't know what we're going to do on the stream, and I mean it. A lot of times you're at a point on the stream where you're like, okay, there's a number of things we could be doing, especially when you're, in the middle of a system that's sort of got multiple axes along which it could be improved. Sometimes it's hard to know exactly what you should be doing. So yesterday we implemented some basic debug UI handling, and so I assumed that the best thing today would be to go ahead and push that a little bit further, but I don't know yet. So I'm just going to dive right into the code, take a look at where we are, and see what I think is the best thing to sort of get the debug stuff up to a point where I'm happy with it. And again, like I said, what I would like to do is I'd like to be able to sort of start to pull the debug system together UI-wise into something that seems like it's relatively usable to us, that we will be able to do the sorts of stuff that we want to do with it. And we have a bunch of things that we might want to do with it now. We've got some variables we can tweak. We've got a profile that, and a log we can inspect, things like that. And so I'd like to have some kind of a way of sort of starting to pull those together. So I think that's what I'm going to try to do. Like I said, I don't know exactly how I want to do that yet. I'm just going to go in there and see what the most logical steps are to take, and we'll work from there. So today is day 197. That means if you'd like to follow along at home, you want to take day 196's source code and unpack it into a directory. That is what I am starting with now. And so if you want to follow along with me at home, that is what you should be starting with as well. Here is the state of the code as we left it. And I think most of the things were working that we did there. We sort of have this v4 that has not been implemented, so we have not done any of the vector types or things like that. But we did add adjustment for scalar values, right? We got that working, so the debug camera, for example, can be adjusted as necessary, and all of our bool values can also be adjusted as well. You can kind of see us playing with that there. So at this point, like I said, what I want to do is kind of, now that we sort of have a little bit of this in place, I want to start to focus on getting the debug system, like sort of bringing it to closure. We've got all these like various pieces in there. I'd like to sort of try to figure out how I can get these all working together into a system that will allow me to leverage what we've written and also kind of continue on with adding other things that we may want. So if, as later in the project, if we come across something and we're like, you know what, there's probably this new debug thing that we would really like to have that would really help us out based on what we're doing, there'll be some clear way of adding that into the system as it stands. So that's what I would like to do. That's how I would like things to end up. So this is kind of interesting here, actually, using the room-based camera. It's pretty funny, actually, as I kind of go through it. That's pretty amusing. I forgot that we had the ability to switch between room-based camera and scrolling. Yeah. Oh, games. They're so wacky and weird. All right, so anyway, what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to go ahead and start playing around with that. And the first thing that I'm going to try is I want to see what I can do about starting to merge this debug view with the ability to view, say, those what's it called there? The profile, the log profile stuff. I'm going to see if I can start to kind of smush those two things together so that we have a unified way of interacting with them, And so one way that I might try to do that is by putting them underneath, one of these things, so that I can like open up a profile and have it here, but so that I don't have to have it. It's something that kind of comes and goes based on the hierarchy, right? And like I said, I don't know exactly where this will lead, but we're about to find out. And remember, I also want to do a thing where we could tear variables off to put another thing in there. So that's the thing that I would like to do at some point, and we'll see as we go how that goes. All right, so here is compilation directory there. Okay, so here is our debug stuff. At the moment, the way that we're doing this, we don't have any way of putting something like the profile group in there, but we've got these debug variable types, and it seems pretty clear to me that we should be able to go ahead and add a debug hierarchy kind of concept in here, it seems like it should be pretty straightforward, right? I should think that I would be able to do something like, debug variable type. What did I call that? A counter, I think, or something like that. I should think I could do that. And if we take a look at how we've defined these things, or rather how we're drawing these things, we should be able to do something by just, taking a look at how I was drawing the graphs before and just start by putting that into this system, right? Like if I look here, we've got this sort of this debug end thing here, right? If I look at this, I've kind of got a thing that already draws them, and the way that the thing draws is it's basically got these regions, and it's got two things, right? It's got regions, which are time spans, and it's sort of any given region is in something called a lane, and each lane is like a CPU. Each lane is like a thread, right? So, I'm not sure exactly what the sanest way to create something like this would be, but what it occurs to me when I kind of look at it is that, like, I would kind of like to potentially view that stuff in multiple ways. Like, I feel like I would like to be able to make it so that there isn't necessarily a hard and fast rule about what is in the hierarchy. If you look at how we've got it here, when I create these debug variables, there's sort of a hard and fast rule that's in there. So when I have a debug group, it expects to have this kind of thing like a first child, last child sort of a situation, right? And so what I would rather do is I'd rather have probably some way of saying, well, some things that are, in this hierarchy, I kind of like to be able to say, well, they don't necessarily have permanent storage like these guys do, There may be things that are kind of transient, like we kind of have here, where we've got, something where there's just these regions, and maybe depending on what I've toggled, the regions will show up as a series of lanes that can be expanded, and maybe a different way to toggle them would be show up as a series of functions that are going to be expanded, something like that. And so as I go through this, I'm going to try to think about whether there's a good way I could make it so that I wouldn't have to worry about the fact that I don't want to have to sort of create all this stuff at the outset, right? I'd like to have some way of doing a more immediate mode UI sort of thing for that, right? And I think I've got a fairly good idea how I might be able to do that. Okay, so if I take a look at when I write these things out, I'm thinking that what I could do here is, instead of counter, what I might do instead is make something that's more like the top-level iterator. So instead, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to say that, like, okay, I've got these debug variables in there, and they kind of say like which kind of variable they're looking at or whatever. But then I have another thing which is like debug variable type, and it's going to be a lane, maybe a lane list or something, like a list of lanes. And then maybe I have another debug variable type, which is like a, some kind of parentage concept. So I've got the lane list in there. And then maybe I have a different thing, which is like from a particular function, what was underneath this function or something like that. And I guess, maybe that's getting ahead of myself. Counter function list, counter lane list, like that. So maybe I'll just start with one, and we'll see where we go from there. So if I wanted to do something like that, then what I can do is, when we do the create variables, right, after we do debug create variables, we can also do something where we take those variables and we, create some additional, we kind of append to the group that we started with, right? So I could do something like where we do that add variable thing. Where is that guy? Handmade debug variables. Yeah. So where we do this thing where we do like a debug add variable, right? I could just, at the end of this guy, postpend something to do that. So let's do like profile by lane or something like that, or profile by thread, something like this. In fact, that's really what I probably should call it, huh? Let's call this a counter thread list. So I'm going to add one of these guys, and I gotta add it to one of these contexts here. And so what I'm thinking is I kind of want, the variable add stuff to maybe not do everything itself. So maybe what I want to do here, right, is I want to be the guy who initializes this context. This kind of makes more sense too, because then it doesn't write to this thing. So I kind of like that better just in general, to be honest. It's kind of like, all right, I can pull that out. I can make it so that I create the context out here. And then I call debug variables, and I pass the context into it. Do I actually need state in here at all then? I don't. So you just pass in the context. And then once you add stuff to the context, I can also myself add a bunch of things to the context. You know what I'm saying? So that seems kind of nice. So if I do debug add variable to add something to the context, you know what, I want to do sort of the direct one here, I suppose, where I do context type profile by thread. So that's good. So if I do that, that will give me back a debug variable. This is the thread list. And I don't know that we actually need any variables for that, because I think that's just fairly deterministic as it is. So I don't know that there's anything else to do for that. So I'm just going to start with that as the very basic thing. And that would add it to here. And I think that should, in theory, just work, right? Oops. But I got to get rid of that at sign. At context becomes context. So again, all I'm doing here is just saying, like, let's try to stuff these two things together, and we'll sort of see what shakes out of it, right? We'll see what we can do. Let's see here, debug state, and debug create variables does not need debug state. There we go. So I think if I read this, I'm guessing, oops, draw debug menu, do I not set that anymore? I thought I did. Oh, I did not. That's my bad. I deleted one of the lines there that I wanted to keep. I want the debug state root group of the hierarchy there, whatever it was. I wanted to make sure that I still set it. So yeah. So here's the root group. Now I'm setting it correctly. And so if I run this, I think I should be okay. Yeah. So when we create a debug, when we do debug variable to text, obviously there is no way to convert this guy. And I'm assuming that this is something that when I do write handmade config as well, I will have to watch out for. Because when we do write handmade config, it's going to try to turn that debug variable into text, right? And I don't actually want to do that. Or rather, I don't want to ever save these guys. So yeah, I think, well, yeah, maybe, or do I want them to show up there? Do I not want them to show up there? I don't think they need to show up there. So anyway, in write handmade config, there's some stuff that we don't want to do. So when we go through variables, we'll probably do something like just to test whether or not a variable wants to be printed. So if, should be written, we'll just check to see if this var should be written. And we'll just have sort of the notion that this thing. And what I can do is I can also put this with the variables themselves. So we can just kind of see, where is that guy? Yeah, with the variables themselves. So we can kind of say what we want to have happen here, right? This is just kind of like a predicate that says, for any given variable type, do we want to save this guy or do we not want to save this guy? Like, does this guy have to be processed or not, right? And so really what that's going to be at the moment is very simple, which would just be, okay, whatever the counter thread list is, if that's the type, then we don't save it. If it is the type, we do save it. But we'll probably kind of add that in, right? We'd presumably like make more stuff there eventually. So when we're drawing the menu now, we have to think about this a little bit more too. So what we do here is we do debug variable to text. And for debug variable to text, now we've got sort of this notion that there are functions, there are people who might want to do more complicated UI, like their own UI. But that's really easy, again, since we can just do whatever we want. We don't have any weird, like, kind of crazy, like object-oriented class hierarchy or anything to deal with. We can just do whatever we want. So we can just say, like, okay, when we do this text nonsense, right, we can take the sort of the concept of the bounds, right? We could sort of formalize this a little bit more. We could take the concept of the bounds, and then when I think we should probably roll this up like this, right? We should probably do something like that. So what we would do here is we'd basically find out if there's any sort of cool rendering that we want to be able to do. And then, for the text case, we would produce the bounds by doing this sort of action, right? So we're just having exactly the same thing that we had before, but now it passes through and sets the bounds. But we can now, and this is just for anybody who we don't know how to do, we'll just say, hey, if we don't know how to do something with you, then go ahead and try to convert you to text. But if we have some kind of special rendering that we want to do, we can just do it, right? So in here, where we've got the counter thread list, and we want to do some kind of rendering to it, we need to be able to produce the bounds, and we need to be able to, draw it. So that's actually both relatively, those are both relatively simple. Right? Because all we have to do there is take a look at that drawing code that we had, which we do have around here somewhere, right? Let's see. It's around here somewhere, peoples. Here it is, right? So you can kind of see what's going on here. We've got our profile drawing code. And if I take this profile drawing code and I just do exactly the same stuff that we were doing before, right, then I should be able to just insert that profile into our little hierarchy pretty easily, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and pull this out, this entire thing out, like so. There we go. And I'm just going to stick it right above here. And this is just going to be, I don't know, internal void, draw profile in, or something like this, Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, well, the profiler just draws in whatever box we tell it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prescribe what the bounds actually would be, right? And so here's like sort of how the bounds are constructed for the other one. But I don't really want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is just kind of use the concept that, like, okay, this is where it would have started, certainly. So that's all good. Although that's on the baseline, so we'll probably want to offset it. But at the moment, that's totally fine. So this is the left corner. This is the, the top for now. But like I said, we're going to have to offset it because I think that's actually the baseline. If I remember correctly, I can't remember, but I think that's the baseline. So we may want to drop it down by the baseline, by the descender height. So what we would want to do here is say, like, okay, this is the min corner, right? And the max corner is going to be whatever the right edge of the screen is, which I don't know I don't actually know what that is at the moment because I don't think we ever define a right edge. Yeah. So I'll just go ahead and define one here. So we'll have a right edge like that. So, it'll go over to the right edge and we'll just do however big we want these guys to be, right? And I don't know how big one of these graphs should be. We probably want to have some kind of parameter that says how big they are. And so that'll probably be something that we actually stick in a parameter somewhere. But for now, let's just say it's 100 pixels tall. I don't know why. It just is. That's how big it is. It's 100 pixels tall. All right. Okay, so we've got our min corner. We've got our max corner here. And so if I want to make a rectangle, I could do that pretty easily. I don't need any of this stuff. All I'd have to do now is do a rect min max, min corner, max corner. And then I can just say like, okay, draw the profile in, and I would need to pass it, whatever it needs. Probably the debug state would be my guess, and then just whatever the bounds are. There's the rectangle. And so now I just have to make this function be able to do whatever the debug state, stuff is that it needs to do, and then I need the bounds, right? So the profile rect just comes in here now. And then I can get rid of the concept of it being in here at all, because now that stuff's in the UI in a nice kind of clean way. And so I can get rid of all this stuff because I know that I won't be getting called for any other reason. If they weren't trying to show it, wouldn't get called. I assume, is there an orthographic call somewhere else? Yeah, it starts right there, so we don't need that orthographic call either. At least I don't think so. Yeah, so there's no reason to have that. So we're all good. We've got the profile rect. And we can, we can go from there. So at the moment, I'm not going to bother with this, although, well, you know what, I could just do it. Why not? There's our profile rect. So here we go. Everything else should work roughly the same. Let me go ahead and look where that profile rect is used. Profile rect. There we go. Profile rect. Profile rect. Profile rect. And off we go. Got to add that right edge. Okay. Debug should be written. That is true. That should take the type of the variable. Rectangle is actually rectangle 2, I believe. Render group is probably debug state render group, huh? And mouse P. So we need to do hit detection in here, which is totally fine as well. Draw profile in, put the mouse P in there. But we're going to have to make that stuff work with what we're doing. So I'm gonna get rid of that hot record bit because we're going to have to make this work with the rest of the UI, or even decide what that's going to do UI-wise, because we don't really know at this point. All right, so right edge in this case is off of the debug state. There we go. We've got our text P. What is that for? That is not supposed to be there at all. Yeah. That is part of this guy and not necessary. So that should just go in there. And this should actually be... So this, since it's going line advance, I assume that at Y should actually be adjusted probably as part of this, but maybe it should just be part of the bounds to advance the way that it does. Because you can see... I feel like when you get the text size and you just go, meh. I don't know. I mean, you can see why maybe the at Y should just be something that happens out here based on the bounds. So I don't really love this, but I'm going to leave it like this for a second, but I do feel like that's not great. I feel like we probably want something more like this. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to do it this way for now. So when this guy does debug get text size, what I might do is say something like make sure it's a certain size to avoid things being stacked differently or something like that. But I'm really just not going to care about that stuff too much. I'd rather have something that was very reliable and does the same thing every time for every path through here, especially in debug code. So I think what I'd rather do is say, forget all this stuff. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say after we draw something, wherever the at Y is, and we're going to advance to the next thing, what I'm going to do is take whatever the bounds are, and I'm going to get the minimum of that. And the Y parameter of that is like the lowest part now that I would be advancing to. You know what I mean? And so like here, where we do that hierarchy UIP thing, and we start at the Y or whatever, you can kind of see what I'm about to... I'm changing sort of the idea of what our Y is, because we want things now that are not always text. Instead of advancing like baseline-wise, I want it to actually be like the upper left corner of like the rectangles that we're drawing, of the rectangular things that we're drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that UIP thing, right? You can see that it does this thing where it uses at Y. And you can see what we did is we took 0.5 times height. That's the top of the screen. Then we offset it by the font scale times that starting baseline Y. So what I'm going to do is just going to remove that, right? That's gone now. And then what I'm going to do is when we draw the text, before we draw the text, I'm going to consider that offset, this offset right here, to be baked into the text drawing. So that way we give the text the upper left corner, and then it will offset down to where the baseline is. That way, things that want to draw rectangularly don't have to be like, oh, where's the baseline? And they don't have to think about fonts at all, which I like better. So I think that's a little more nice. So we're going to have get min, we're going to get the minimum bounding box, and then what we're going to do is we're going to subtract away a spacing y value. And the spacing y value is just how many pixels we want to leave between things. So I don't know, like maybe we leave 4 pixels between things. I don't know, however many we want. Let's see. Get y. We could also do some kind of a font scaling sort of situation, but anyway. Dot y must have a class struct union. What is this? Left of dot y. What does get min return normally? Does it not return a vector? Get min. Let's get min corner. Very well. Okay. So let's see what's going on here. That does not seem very good. Our rectangle is not good. What is wrong with rectangle? Why is rectangle broken? Why? So I've got my at x and at y here, and then I get whatever the... that's why. Right. So we need to remember the min corner, which is before we offset this thing, right? That's actually the sort of the left corner there of our thing. And then where we draw the text is offset by the baseline, right? So where we draw the text, oops, there we go. Where we actually draw the text is what's going to be offset by the baseline, like so. That's more what we're looking for. So yeah, so debug text out, that is where we're actually going to draw the text out. And let's see here. Text be undeclared identifier. Yeah, we don't actually care about that. And we need a sec. There we go. All right, so let's try that out. I say. Min corner. There we go. Okay. So that is not good. That is bad. That is a bad thing that has happened here. And I'm not sure what I did to deserve that, to be honest. I feel like that was correct, but apparently it wasn't. So okay, we have our min corner. That is the right location. We then want to do a... we then want to do a offset to get ourselves to the baseline, which we do here, and we should draw the text. We then take whatever the bounds actually were that we produced for whichever one of these, whichever case we were actually working with. When we produce the actual bounds, we then say whatever the lowest point was in there, that's what we want our new top to be. And we're going to advance, we're going to leave a little bit of space in there. So that seems right to me, but I'm obviously forgetting something, well, for obvious reasons. The fact that it's all scrunched up is not how it should go, to say the very least. So when I get back this, I feel like that should be correct. It offsets it by the min corner, and so I feel like that... right. So I feel like part of the problem is this is the top corner, so that's actually the max, right? That's actually the max corner. So I think that because, right, we're saying we're at the very upper part. So when I do here, like this same thing here, when I do min corner, max corner, this is that standard thing where I always say I think going down from the top of the screen, even though that's not the correct case. The min corner would actually be the low point, and the max corner would be the high point, right? Like you can see there. So I did the same thing in this one. And so the max corner is actually going to be, or you can't even say max corner because I don't know what the max corner is going to be. But point being, I just know that I've got sort of my left point, if you will, which is this real value, and I've got my top point, which is this value. And then when we get back this rectangle and put it in the bounds, what I need to do is say, okay, that is essentially, you know, that's the width and height of it, right? But now I have to offset it by a specific value that's going to be constructed from these guys. So I want to offset it. I want to offset it by the left px. That's correct. Because I need to move it over so that it starts there. But in terms of y, I don't want to move it all the way up. I want to move it all the way up, but I want to move it minus its width. And I guess that's why I sort of had instinctively started to do it this way. I kind of have to be able to access bounds itself to know what it is. So whatever like the height of the bounds actually is, however tall the thing is I'm placing, I need to offset it by the top less that amount so that it will actually line up properly, if that makes sense. Then when we draw, we would draw at these values like we thought before. So I think that should be roughly correct. I think. It may not be. It's a good question. My. That's kind of cool looking, by the way. All right. All right, so not quite there yet, but getting there. Slowly but surely working my way out of thinking from top down, from the top of the screen down. Okay, so excuse me. Yeah, so debug text out at, that part is not really particularly onerous or interesting, I don't think. It's really just these guys that are in the mix. So when I create one of these guys with the get text size, when I go to offset it, I'm offsetting it by the left px, and I'm moving it up to where I think it should be in the screen based on wherever the @y is, right? And then I just remove however much height it was, so that puts it back, you know, that aligns its top edge with the top py value. And that seems correct to me. And if I look at what's happening here, when I do debug text out, I think that's correct because I'm starting at the left px, which is where I think I should be, and I'm starting at the top py, but I'm offsetting by whatever the baseline is, which is, again, what I think should probably happen. At least that seems like what should happen. And then I draw the text. Once we have those bounds, that's the problem. I did not save my offset bounds. Okay. So it's still a little wonky though, right? It still looks a little bit weird. And I'm not sure what's going on there. That doesn't seem quite right. And I'm not getting the highlighting that I would have expected to get. So I'm thinking that the bounds must still be a little bit weird, right? Although I didn't actually look to see when I set the item color. Okay, that's the problem. So I also need to set my item color before I draw things, right? That's obviously got to happen. So let's see. So all right, so we're in much better shape now. However, when I open this guy, I'm kind of getting my code is getting stuck here. What is the oddity here? Handmade config. Man, it's been a sloppy day today. It's been a sloppy day today. So things that should not get written, obviously, all we really want to prevent them from doing is that. We don't want to stop them from iterating. Otherwise, we'll go into an infinite loop where we just loop on var all day, even though var is not changing. All right, so we're getting a little better here. And we can sort of, we still have a little bit of a weird positioning thing. You can see what's sort of happening there. I believe that's because we're taking into account, again, the rectangles. It depends whether you have a descender, how big your rectangle is. So that was the thing I was saying before we might want to sort of change a little bit. But you can also see now that we have done the first part of what we wanted to actually do, which is to include one of these profiles in line with our actual, with the rest of our actual stuff. And so if I wanted to make that expandable or collapsible, all I would have to do now is actually make a group for it to live inside, right? So that it can be expanded and collapsed, that, you know, because right now it doesn't have any way of doing that. So when I add that thread list, what I can do is inside Handmade, you know, variables and stuff, we have this ability to kind of open groups and close them. So what I can do in here is just say, like, all right, let's go ahead and get a group around that guy, like so. And this will just be like profile or something, I don't know. And, you know, I could probably just call it this by thread, I suppose. So if I've got this wrapping the thread, then I should be able to, when I open up the profile, you can see that now I've got that stuff by thread there. And, you know, I can interact with it to some degree. I don't think we want to, yeah, we're going to have to think about exactly, again, how to make this, the UI for this thing a little bit better. But now we can at least kind of open and close it along with everything else. We do have to do one more thing, which is that if we want, we probably want to fix those sort of guys who are doing debug text line outs at the bottom there, because they're not lined up properly. And that's just because when we actually sort of print this stuff out, when we do the draw, you know, the menu draw stuff, what I want to make sure is that here, right, we're sort of taking that at Y. I feel like it's not quite, it must, I don't know if that's because I'm setting the bounds wrong on the min corner or something like that, but you can see that, like, afterwards when we take this stuff, oh, I know why. It's because the debug text line stuff does not include this offset, right? It does not include the offset. It doesn't use that top corner. And so when we do, like, debug text line, text out at, the automatic stuff here, where we're using debug state at Y, that really has to be, again, adjusted by the baseline value if we want it to actually work, right? If we want it to be like everybody using sort of the min corner, right? But then it's all good, right? Then everybody lines up properly, and so on. So I think that seems pretty reasonable, at least so far, right? That all seems pretty reasonable. And hey, now we can sort of, what am I doing here? Now we can sort of get that profile in line and just open it when we want it and so on, right? And that's all pretty easy. So yeah, the next step here is just to start making this a little bit more sensible. So I feel like probably we'd want to clean up a little bit of this stuff. And then we'd also want to start to think about how we would actually make this UI thing usable. And, you know, you could imagine if I had more than one of those. So probably what you want to do too would be something like, you know, when we begin the group, when our group, debug group, where is group? Must be here somewhere. Well, thread list. So this thing here where we do begin variable group, end variable group, really we probably want two of them because we might want multiple things in here. So it'd be, right, this probably doesn't have a name because it's just a big block of stuff. And again, you could imagine in a second, we'd probably have, you know, by function or something in here. And have another way, you know, we'll have another one of these that we could do. But for the moment, I'll just do both of them. And this will be function list, like so. So, you know, again, pretty basic stuff. It's just now we have ways of opening up profile views in here so that it's kind of all looped into the thing. And now it's sort of annoying because, like, you know, we still have this kind of annoying compile thing It was fun while it lasted, but again, it just seems like it's too onerous to kind of really have that be our model, is that we have to compile every time, because MSVC just is not fast enough for that. But we can fix that as a separate thing we do later. So when we have something like this, the other thing that you could imagine wanting to do is like maybe we want to be able to like resize how big these profiles are or something like that. So if we wanted to change the size of one of these profile views, then it's pretty easy, because we already have a place that we store extra stuff associated with the debug variable group, So any one of these debug variables where we have stuff, it's free for us to just add a thing, which is like, oh, this is a debug like profile or something thing, debug profile settings, I don't know. So this is like a profile, and that can just have some stuff in it, and I don't know what it would want to have in it, but it's got debug profile settings, and in it there's maybe something like dimensions. So it has like width and a height to it that maybe you could drag out. And so if we did that, then we could allow that to be something that's edited by the user, so that when we actually do draw a profile in, instead of the profile rect that we do there coming from us just making an assumption about what the max corner of the thing would be, instead what we could do is say like, oh, okay, the min corner of this thing is actually going to be whatever the top is minus the dimension, right? So we've got the profile settings there. We're going to minus the dimension x, and then the dimension y. And then in the max corner, we're going to do like, okay, whatever the left edge was, the min corner, we're just going to take that and we're going to move it over, right? So we're going to say whatever the min corner x is plus whatever the dimension x was, something like that, right? And so if we do that, now when we do one of those things where we add the thread list sort of thing, we go, oh, thread list profile dot dimension equals v2, I don't know, it's going to be 1024 wide and it's going to be 100 tall or something like this, right? That's like how big that one's going to be, and this one will be a different size, right? This one will be like 200 tall. It's like it's taller. We don't know why. It just is. And so then when I open these, you can see that now they're different sizes, right? And we never did put in anything that tries to clip these guys. That's something that we should probably do eventually. The renderer can already clip them. We just don't actually say anything about it. But anyway, we can see what size they're supposed to be. And so if we wanted to, we could probably put in as well like a little handle here that we use to like resize where stuff is or something like that. Wouldn't be too hard, right? So like maybe we want to make it so you can easily resize that. You want to be able to like have a little handle there that you could grab on and move back and forth. And so if I did that, what I would have to do is when I am drawing these things, when I do my draw profile in, right after I do that, I could add a thing that was like some kind of a little, like a little handle or something like that, like a little like a little grabbable widget, right? So if I want to do something like maybe do a push rect and take wherever the max corner is, I guess it really wouldn't be the max corner. I guess it would be like sort of the size point or something like that. And the size point would be the min corners, or the max corners x, and the min corners y. So it would be like the lower, because that's where people usually think of sizing from the lower right corner, getting that way. So, if we had one of those size P's and we want to do a push rect here, here it is, oops. Let's try that one more time. Push rect, there it is. So if I want to do a push rect there, what I could do is say, let's do a rect center half dim and push in the size P, and how big do we want this to be? I don't know, something like 2 by 2, or maybe it's bigger, maybe it's 4 by 4, I'm not sure. I don't really care at the moment how big it is at all, but there it is. So once that does its little thing, you can see now that we've got like a little handle that we could drag here, right? We've got a little piece that we could manipulate, like a manipulator that we could do. And so again, what we'd like to do is we'd like to have some way of expanding the UI to have the notion that what I am dragging at any particular time may not just be on a value, it may be something else, right? And so again, we already have this concept sort of baked in there to the UI. Oops. No, there we go. To the UI, which is I've got, and I don't really even remember what the functions are these days. Like I said, my brain's so addled most of the time. I have so much work to do. I like do work all day, and then I come home and I'm just like, I don't even remember what we're doing on Handmade Hero. But then I see the code and I'm like, oh, right, okay. So debug, begin, interact. It has a way of us sort of saying, what are we actually interacting with here, right? And so the problem that we would have is right now our model is to just store a debug variable, and that's the only thing that we know about. We only know that we're interacting with a debug variable. But a debug variable might have lots of different handles to it. Now there's two ways that we could go about sort of making this a little bit different. And I don't know which one of them would be the best way to do it. There's sort of like two different branches to go around. One is that we could just introduce a synthetic debug variable that's something like, oh, this is, I'm dragging this v2. It's a synthetic debug variable. That's a v2. That's the dimensions of this box. And then you still always have everything as just a v2. But the other way to do it is to sort of expand the notion of what I am pointing at to be different things, right? Because since we already know that we've got like different debug interactions that might happen, what we can do instead is change this concept where we do the begin interact to be, instead of it picking what the interaction is going to be based on the thing that it sees, it's just going to pick the interaction based on what the person who like placed the things there says it was probably going to be, right? Now I know that sounds a little bit strange, but just bear with me for a second. So here's our interaction types, right? So let's say that what I did is I said, okay, there's a debug interaction, and inside here, right, I have whatever the hot variable and the next hot variable and that sort of stuff is, right? Well, let's suppose I also have something like debug interaction, hot interaction. Hot interaction, what that is it's a thing that says, when I was mousing over something, if it's some kind of a special purpose manipulator, it may want to say, hey, I know that normally you would do thing X by looking at the variable and picking something, but I want you to do a different thing. And I'm going to tell you what that thing is, right? So in here, what we would say is, okay, check to see if whatever the hot interaction is valid. If it is, we just assume that that's what you're going to do, right? That's the thing to do. So when we do like next hot here or whatever, and we do that stuff, let's go ahead and do that. So when we clear this stuff out, we'll just say, well, when we're about to do a sweep, right, the next hot interaction is going to be cleared to debug interaction none. And then when we process next hot, which we process like there and here, we will do, hot interaction, next hot interaction, there we go. And hopefully you can kind of see where this is going. I assume that you can. So if I want to, I can just say debug interaction like size, resize profile for now. I don't want to get too far ahead here. So I'll just say, okay, we're going to do a thing where we can resize the profile. And so what happens is when we're interacting with this thing, we'll go in here and we'll say, yeah, like, where is this? Where are you? Where are you? We had you in a second, size P. There we are. We just take whatever the rectangle was. This is the size box. We produce the size box. We're going to draw it. And what we can do is we can say, oh, well, okay, like we were doing down here when we do is in rectangle, what we might want to do is say, okay, we may want to set the next hot thing to be equal to, yeah, I'm thinking about this. I feel like we kind of want the hit testing to be a little more specific. So I think, we want it to be something like that, right? So what I want to say is I want to test the size box first. So if it's in the rectangle of the size box, I want to do one thing. If it's not, then I do another, right? And so what I'll do here is debug state next hot interaction equals 0. But in this case, I'll do next hot interaction equals resize profile. You know what I'm saying? And I can do the same thing that I was doing before. So for example, in here, I can actually do a thing where I say like, oh, okay, when I push this rect on, I can do a test to see whether the currently hot interaction is my interaction, right? I could say, is the current interaction that would be hot, is that resize profile? And am I hot, right? Like, and I could also do something like this. Is hot and that. And if it is, again, I can do the yellow thing. And if not, I can do the white thing. So testing whether something is hot, we already do. It's what we do right here. So instead of making that be just a test for the color, what we would do is we'd just say, oh, okay, that's actually now the test that we just save. And then the item color is just, going to see, are we hot or are we not hot, right? And now we know the item color. Right. So yeah. And we could also say in here, we could do things like if it's hot and the interaction is not, we could do something like this as well. Debug state hot interaction equals 0. Something like this. There's a bunch of things we could do. I'm just putting some new stuff out there. And, normally we'd probably collapse these things down a bit, but like I said, one thing at a time. Right? Okay. So once we get that, in theory, we should be able to see a little something happening here, right? Which is that when I mouse over this, it turns yellow. So now you can see that I'm actually highlighting a particular piece of this guy. But of course, when I actually interact with it, nothing actually happens. And the reason for that is because we haven't actually written anything, right, to actually do the interaction. But it's not particularly hard to write that interaction, right? If I wanted to write that interaction, when we are doing our mousing around, in here, I can just say, oh, well, if the interaction type is to resize the profile, then I can just say, well, okay, whatever the group, whatever the profile dimensions are, I'm just going to go ahead and add to them whatever the dmouse is, right? And that'll change the dimensions. But what I would also like to do when I change the dimensions, I want to make sure that I don't go below a certain value. So I'll also do something like here, well, okay, if the profile dimension x is less than, some minimum, I won't let it get less than like 10 by 10 or something, right? Or I don't really know exactly what I want to say there, but something like that. I could do, this, like var dimension x equals min, something like that. You know what I'm saying? So again, really, really simple. Nothing particularly tricky here. I don't remember what our min function is in this particular thing, but I'm pretty sure we have one. Minimum somewhere, anyone, platform, minimum, min. Do we have a min? I don't actually know if we have a min. Minimum. Apparently we do. We'll just say that we do. So, now if I open this, right, oh dear. Well, that didn't go quite as I had planned. How did that change in the way that it just did? Dmouse P should not be particularly large. Am I wrong about that? Oh. That's why. Yeah. If you want to clamp something, you don't want to use minimum. You want to use maximum. Yeah. And it looks like our mouse is upside down as well, right? From the screen coordinates, which is a little janky. So what did I do there to deserve that? If the mouse is changing, it should have increased. Oh, so I must negate the Y value, right? When I actually subtract, so when I do my size box here, I start at the top and I subtract the dimension down, which means that if you move up, if you move in positive Y, the thing should actually get smaller, which is crazy, but that's just how that goes, right? So it's really this kind of a thing. You know what I'm saying? So that's, again, a really simple way to just kind of make that in there. So now, okay, we want to make it so that we can have some profile graphs, and that's all good, and it's fine, it's fun, whatever. We can size those guys, and you saw how easy that was for me to add, right? Just based on the way that it goes. Now, you don't usually want to actually do resizing this way. You want to actually use the delta from point, a delta from point method. The reason I say that is because, you can see what happens here. Because I'm just adding the delta, once you clamp, the mouse is now wrong. You know what I'm saying? So, if you want to be a little more swanky about it, what you actually do is record what the down click point was and whatever. But for debug UI, I don't know that we care about that. Hopefully everyone understands that it's not, something that we're trying to do for any kind of fancy UI. But you can kind of see, again, it's really easy for us to add that in there, and that's what we want. We want it to be easy to add that. Now, we can make it even easier to add stuff like that by starting to compress out some of that code that's kind of a little bit janky in there now, that I just kind of put it in and, kind of wrote it in place. But there's a bunch of things we can do to make that even easier as well, and maybe we'll take a look at some of those tomorrow. But for now, I think we're getting towards the end of the time limit, because I think I started around 10, if that makes sense. But we're getting pretty close to some good stuff here, right? And hopefully, you can see where this sort of thing is going, right? And yeah, there's a couple of things that I'm not sure about yet. I'm not sure how we're going to draw the profile UI, but at least it's kind of all in one system now, and that's kind of good. And I think that we could also do a pretty easy thing here where we could compress all this stuff into a pretty clean thing where we just have profile and debug kind of a thing. So you could imagine doing something like this, right? Let's go grab a group. So in here, if I were to do something like this, where at the start of the context, I just go debugging or something like this, and then close it here. Now I've kind of got this notion of a root group up there, where it's out of our way and it doesn't come into being until we start to grab stuff from it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of nice too. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the Q&A. Let's take a look. If anyone has any questions about what I was doing, feel free to put a Q colon in front of them and ask me. Panic00, do you think this way of structuring UI code could be used to build a full application or is it just useful for debug UIs? What extra things do you think you'd need to add to make it useful for a full app UI? Well, so I guess what I would say is I can draw you a visual diagram. It's going to be amusing. Here is what I would say. So essentially, I would say yes, this way of structuring the code does totally work for doing a full app. But the problem is, it's not like we're just at the beginning of the stuff that you would implement for that. So even you'll see me do probably 1 or 2 compressions on this before we're done. But there's a lot more sort of compressions you go through. Like the first thing you do, and we'll do this later, right, is you take this stuff now. Hopefully you can see it start to grow. Do you see how we have debug interaction, debug variable for the hot interaction and the hot variable we're interacting with? But then we have this next hot interaction, next hot. There's a concept there, which is like the memento. It's like the thing, the interaction cookie, if you will, that stores the information that's necessary to understand what will start happening if the user should click down at this point, right? And that becomes a more complicated data structure that is not just ad hoc like this, okay? Then you've got other stuff like the interactions themselves have state. There's like a bunch of stuff that will happen along the way. And, you know, we're going to stop with the debug system. We're going to stop like here. This is where we will stop. And there's all this other stuff that happens in between. So nothing I'm doing now is stuff that you wouldn't do on the way to doing the full app version, but there's just a lot of stuff that happens along the way. And so that's how I would say it. Let's see. Connor Rents, were you nervous the first time you streamed Handmade Hero? No, I was not really. For whatever reason. I feel like it's a lot, like you can see me, but I can't see you, right? And I feel like one of the things that's true about the nervousness of public speaking is the actual physical, like you seeing a large group of people that you are communicating with makes people nervous, you know? And if you can't see that there's a large group of people, like, I mean, I just see a number. If I can't see all those actual people, I don't think it elicits the same kind of response that actually publicly speaking to that many people would elicit, you know? And so I feel like it's pretty hard to get really nervous about streaming something because it doesn't evoke the kind of response that, like, you know, we've had streams where there's been like 3,000 people on or something when it was on the front page of Twitch. If you actually got up in front of 3,000 people, that's kind of crazy. Like, to see that many people, that's a huge number of people, and I think that would have an effect on someone. I don't know if it would have an effect on me personally, but it would generally have an effect, I would think. But if you just are streaming to 3,000 people, well, it's no different than streaming to one person as far as the actual sensory input that you get on the stream. I just see one webcam, no matter how many people there are out there. And so it just doesn't have an effect. You're just like, I'm just programming on the computer, you know? The Big Giant Head 2. What do you think about GCC and its DBG? I do not like debugging generally on those systems. GDB is just not a very good heads-up debugger. It's a good, it does the features you need for the most part, but it just the console, the heads-up version of it, it just doesn't let you debug as efficiently as you need to. So, it's fine in a pinch, but it's just not a good everyday debugger. And so, as a thing that you use, like, typically my interaction with GDB, I try to keep to just like I'm porting somewhere, and so I don't care how efficient the debugging is because I've already written like 99% of the code and I'm just doing the port or whatever, and that it's fine. But yeah. Did you ever get your IRC fixed to show names again? No. Hex chat still never doesn't show me names. To be fair, I haven't tried. Like, I didn't actually try to get it working. But no, it did not spontaneously start working. Arch Ruffle, have you considered working at Valve? What is your opinion of them and their structure? Well, I mean, I did interview at Valve long, long ago. Like in 1998, I think. But I did not decide to work there. I decided to go work at Gas Powered Games because I thought the game they were making was more interesting. I don't really like first-person shooters that much. The last time I liked a first-person shooter, it was Doom. So I didn't really like the idea of working on Half-Life, which is what they were working on at the time. It was right at the very end of the project, I think. And so I have never really considered working there after that, for, again, pretty much the same reasons. I mean, talking about their structure or other things like that, there's plenty of things to like or not like about Valve structure, just like there's plenty of things to like and not like about any company that you might go to work for. And so to some degree, it's more about like what would I be working on, and am I interested in doing that thing? And to a large extent, Valve just isn't doing the things that I would necessarily be interested in doing, if that makes sense. But, like I said, if you're going to go work somewhere, of the places you could work, Rad Game Tools is probably my favorite place. But, Valve, they pay very well, right? And there's a lot of people there who I like. I have a lot of friends who work at Valve. And so, it would not bother me if you're like, you have to go work at Valve. That would not be, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, that's going to be awful or anything. I'd be like, that seems totally reasonable. I don't think it would be my first choice because I don't get excited about perhaps working on, I mean, whatever it is that would be like Dota or something, right? I just don't like that sort of thing very much, and it would be hard for me to really get super motivated about that. So I don't know. I mean, maybe, working on the VR system sounds like fun. They did some really good stuff there, so that might be interesting. And the other thing would be like maybe you work on Steam for a while. There's a bunch of things about Steam, that maybe would be interesting to change or something. I don't know, but hopefully that's a good enough answer. Core activities. What will the game look like in 25 episodes? It shouldn't look really any different from now because we still have a few engine things to finish up. So I'm really just assuming that like we'll probably do like the art changeover to start like putting actual stuff in at like, let's say 250, 240. I don't know. I mean, it depends. It's hard to say. I don't try to predict those things because I don't like to rush things. The point is to be educational here, and if the main point is people want to like just make a game, that doesn't really interest me very much, right? Like, that's if you're just trying to make a game quickly, then and you don't really care about like the quality or in how to program the systems, then go grab Game Maker and drop some sprites in or whatever, right? So I don't want to rush things. When I say that like maybe we'll be there at this, that's just an estimate based on where we are. And like I said, 200 episodes was like kind of my feel at the very start. I was like, it'd probably take about 200 episodes to do the engine stuff, and we're we could have blitzed it to do that. We could have not done this debug code much and just focused on finishing the lighting and the Z stuff and probably hit that. But I don't want to do that. I want things to take as long as they take. And I want to be able to spend time showing people how to do stuff, even if that thing is not 100% necessary. I want to be able to do things that aren't 100% necessary and show here's how you make a little UI if you need one, so that people know. Trucks, will you be using profiling tools like gperf to find hotspots in the code, or rely on your own debug system only? I think we will probably, we have pretty good profiling now, so I don't know that we will really need something like gperf. We do use IACA though to dump our assembly. We've used that on the stream before, and we would use that again to take a look at the instruction counts for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And again, yeah, too, on the time thing, the thing to remember is 197 is 197 hours. So like, you know, figure round that up to 200 hours. 200 hours if your studio were working like even like, you know, even 20 hours a week, which is like half-time programmer, right? That's 10 weeks. It's a pittance of time, right? So, you know, it sounds like a lot because sounds like a day, but it's not a day, it's an hour. It's hardly any time at all, right? And so I feel like if you look at how much stuff we've done in 200 hours, it's kind of staggering. I feel like if anything, we went pretty fast. And, you know, if I wasn't worried about the fact that I don't want to spend like 7 years of my life streaming this program, I would have actually looked at it and gone like, let's go slower, right? Because I could spend more time talking about individual things, or, you know, explore more options for things and show people stuff. So it's generally the case that I think we've actually made pretty fast time, and I really don't want to go any faster. And I know that some people just don't care, and they're impatient about stuff too, and they just want to like see some particular thing that they care about. But all I can say is really like that's not going to happen. Like it's never going to be rushed one way or the other. And like I said, if anything, I feel like it went pretty fast, because at the end of the day, we just haven't spent that many hours on it. Have you met Michael Abrash or Carmack in person? Yes, I have met both of them in person. I mean, you know, I've met Carmack a few times at conventions and meetings and stuff like this. Michael Abrash, you know, we worked 2 offices down from me for 3 years, 4 years, something like that. So, I mean, I know Mike Abrash very well. So are we all good here? I guess we don't got no more questions. So I'm going to close this down. Odin607, are you going to see The Martian? I don't know. I have not read the book. And I don't know. Anna read the book, and she was going to the movie. She said it was a really good book. I don't know if I should. Maybe when she goes to the movie, I'll ask her if I should read the book first or something, or if I should just go see it. Icarist, you talked about products you'd like to program. We are seeing a bunch of space games now after being without decent ones for a while. Are you interested in space games at all? I guess I am interested in space games at all, but you know, I'd have to think about it. I want a real joystick. Like in the old days, we used to have that nice proportional flight stick. Uh, if I was gonna play a space game, I would want like a really good joystick for it, and I would want the game to be like good, like the old X-wing game was. I don't like these stupid like I didn't like Wing Commander. I don't like the model of just like some people randomly flying around, sort of shooting at each other, just kind of flying in loops all the time and not doing anything interesting. I like the idea of like having a lot more sort of intelligence in the game and like situational awareness and stuff and managing things like, you know, like the X-Wing games had like, you know, this concept that you manage your shield and your power and your other stuff, your firing pattern and stuff. If I was going to play a game again, I would want it to be like really high quality space game. I wouldn't just play some random stupid space game where you just kind of shoot at stuff a little bit and it's boring. So it depends. And I have not bothered to order a joystick, and I have not actually gone and looked to see if any of these new space games are going to have that kind of quality to them. Like I don't know if Eve Valkyrie has that. I don't know if Elite Dangerous has that. I did play Enemy Starfighter, but it was really early still, and it just didn't seem to have a lot of that stuff yet in terms of the feel. And I obviously haven't. I've also not played Limit Theory, but that it looks like it's still pretty early as well. I did play Kerbal Space Program. Kerbal Space Program kind of felt to me like the physics engine wasn't good enough for what they were trying to do. Like, you'd build these things, but it seemed kind of arbitrary. It looked like a bad spring mass model or something. It just, I don't know, it just didn't work. And so I felt like if you're going to do Kerbal Space Program right, it should have like a awesome physics engine. Like it should have a physics engine so good that you can test a like NASA rocket on it and it'll be correct. So, IQ144, when is the next Casey drink and game night? You know, I don't really know about that. You know, maybe in 3 weeks, something like that. Those are pretty infrequent. Those tend to be pretty infrequent. So. Graham 7. Oh, Star Citizen. Yeah, I did not mention Star Citizen because I have never looked at Star Citizen. It sounded to me like that thing was kind of an epic disaster where they just took a ton of money but don't necessarily have like the sort of... They don't necessarily have the kind of a structure or like teams in place that can execute the kind of thing that they're talking about, which is massive. And so I'm really nervous about Star Citizen. I kind of feel like that may be one of those things where like $100 million goes into a giant hole somewhere and is never seen again. But you know, I don't know. So I don't know what's going to happen with Star Citizen. That's going to be interesting to see. I hope that it doesn't happen because I don't really like when people get burned by crowdfunding because then, you know, it makes them maybe less likely to crowdfund things in the future. And there's been a lot of stuff that's been crowdfunded that's, you know, I'm really happy it was crowdfunded and I want people to keep doing that. And so they've taken so much money. And, you know, they weren't even like a studio to begin with, right? And so, you know, you end up here with like $80 million or something and you're supposed to build this gigantic game and like, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I hope it goes okay, at least passably. I hope it doesn't crash and burn in a spectacular fashion, because I think that would be pretty bad. You know, for maybe it would kind of take away some goodwill from the crowdfunding because it's so high visibility. So hopefully, you know, it doesn't go too wrong. You know, because Elite Dangerous went really well, it seems like, right? Like, they took money for that crowdfunding. They got a reasonable amount. It seems like they shipped the game, you know, in a reasonable amount of time. And it's, you know, it seems like it's what they said they would deliver. You know, I don't know if it's like the best game ever or anything, or if it's what people exactly wanted, but you know, they delivered, right? So yeah. Core activities. How did you end up working on The Witness, and what is it like to get jobs as a freelancer? I probably don't really know the answer to the second question, but so in terms of how I ended up working on The Witness, that was just like, John's a good friend of mine, and I knew that they might need some help, so it was really just a, like, you know, it was like a friend thing. I don't really know much about what it's like to get jobs as a freelancer, because again, I've really only mostly worked for just my friends, and you know, if you don't just already know places who would want you to do work for them, I don't know what you would do. I'm not really sure. Start Japan takes. If Star Citizen does end up delivering, do you think it has the potential to change the current publisher AAA model, or do you think it will be a one-shot regardless of its success? Well, I mean, like anything else, I'm not sure that even the people who did it would be able to reproduce it. But you know, I don't think it has that much of an impact on the publisher AAA model, because it's really no different than the publisher AAA model at some level, right? The current publisher AAA model is about charging a lot of money for a game, like $60, and then upselling you on a bunch of stuff, right? Like in-game stuff, pre-order bonuses, special editions, season passes, and that's exactly what Star Citizen does, right? So, I mean, what would change? Nothing would change. Like, the AAA model is exactly like Star Citizen at some level. And the only difference is publishers don't have to get the money up front because they have the money, so there's no real need for them to do so. But yeah, so I don't think it would change things too much, but I don't know, you know. All right, I'm going to wind it down. Where am my page at? There it is. Thank you, everyone, for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you, as always. If you would like to follow along at home, you can always pre-order the game, and it comes with the source code, and you can play around with that source code at home, experiment, and learn from the source code in your own time. You can do that on handmadehero.org. We also have a forum site you can go to where you can ask questions. We have a Patreon page you can subscribe to support the video series. We have a tweet bot that tweets the schedule at you if you want to catch the video series live. And we also have, if you type handmadecon.org into your browser, we have a convention happening December 5th. You can buy tickets right here. I will say that the tickets sold a lot faster than I thought they were going to sell. And we've already sold more tickets than the number of tickets that I thought that I was hoping we would get. So yeah, I am a little bit nervous that we may have too small of a space. I was thinking there was no way we would fill 275 seats, but that is looking like maybe that was not such a safe bet, because I haven't even announced the speakers yet. And pretty much all of the speakers are much bigger names than I am in the industry, so I am a little nervous about what will happen. But that's just but it's better to have too much interest than too little interest, and so we'll just leave it at that. And what popcorn? Wait, there's a limit. Oh yeah, so in here where you look at the thing where I'm talking about 275. 275 is the total number of people we could fit in the room. Like, that's it. So after 275, there's no. I mean, because right, like I have to rent a space. I picked, you know, a space that I thought would be big enough, and you know, it's expensive to rent places. So I just picked a place that would be reasonably inexpensive and nice. But that means it only fits 275 people. I felt that was pretty safe because, you know, how many people are going to travel to this, but it looks like maybe, I don't know what'll happen. So we'll see. But yeah, I guess what I would say is maybe if you know you really want to go to Handmade Con and you haven't bought a ticket yet, you probably want to buy a ticket soon. I'm nervous what's going to happen when I post the speaker list. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. Point being, there's a con. It's going to be pretty awesome. It's probably going to be really ridiculously awesome, actually. I'm really looking forward to it. So if you're interested in that, definitely sign up for that. Yeah, and then I'll see you in December. But until then, like I said, I'll be back here tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, doing some more programming. Kind of like the way that debug UI stuff is starting to shape up. I think there's a lot of fun things we can do with it. I want to get the profiles working, and I want to clean up some of that stuff. So we've got several days. I'd like to do tomorrow, and then probably like next week, I'd like to spend just doing debug UI stuff and kind of just getting all that stuff into a nice, clean package for us to use. And so we'll be doing that. So again, 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time tomorrow. Until then, please have fun programming on your own, and I will see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.